We are continuing with the teachings of Shri Nisargadatta Maharaj from the book I Am That. The problem is that the individual seeks a path that can lead him or her to an insight where they are free from all these sins. So the individual says that I must not do anything wrong. But Maharaj has a different view on that. So I'm going to read a couple of lines from the book. Maharaj says, discard all traditional standards, leave them to the hypocrites. Only what liberates you from desire and fear and wrong ideas is good. As long as you worry about sin and virtue, you will have no peace. So you see what is happening here is when we believe duality to be the only reality, we cling between the opposites, the good, the evil, the moral, the immoral. And the thing is, imagine this like a pendulum. Say one side is good, the other side is evil. So the moment you're thinking, your mind shifts towards one side, it has already gained potential to swing onto the other side. And this is how the pendulum keeps on moving. So pain, pleasure, pain, pleasure. And this is the trap. But when this understanding that I am not this limited entity that I believe myself to be, when this understanding, this insight comes about, the rotation, the movement of this pendulum gets limited. So earlier the swing was to extreme ends. Now the swing is just centered in the middle. So life becomes relatively much less painful. In fact, one can say that there is a baseline peace. A peace that retains irrespective of the external circumstances. So Maharaj says, and I'll read this, he says that sin and virtue refer to a person only. Without a sinful or virtuous person, what is sin or virtue? At the level of the absolute, there are no persons. The ocean of pure awareness is neither virtuous nor sinful. Sin and virtue are invariably relative. You see, human beings have this tendency to project their personal attributes onto every object they perceive, everything they perceive. And what the mind does is that it objectifies the absolute, the pure awareness. Until the understanding is not there, that also happens. The mind objectifies the absolute and puts personal attributes onto the object. So the mind says that if I am like this, if I commit sin, and if I do if I do virtuous deeds, then there should be an absolute sin and there should be an absolute virtue. So it imagines the awareness to be discriminatory like itself. And this is the reason why the mind is called suffering in traditional scriptures. Because the moment a thought is invoked, it immediately creates the dualistic split of the subject and the object. Now, in this case, my mind is the subject, and the object is the pure awareness. I create it as an object. Not knowing my true nature, I create pure awareness as the object. And now I apply my attributes to God. So I say that God must know what pure sin and pure virtue is. But for awareness, there is no discrimination. So awareness does not create this division of right and wrong, good and bad, moral, immoral. These distinctions are only at the level of the mind. And that is what Maharaj is trying to convey here. So he says, to identify oneself with the particular is all the sin there is. So let me read one more line before that. He says, to nourish the ideas, I am a sinner, I am not a sinner, is sin. To identify oneself with the particular is all the sin there is. The impersonal is real, the personal appears and disappears. I am is the impersonal being. I am, this is the person. So for being, which is your true nature, there is no concept of sin or virtue. It is only mind which characterizes thoughts. The mind labels thoughts according to past conditioning. So all the traditional values, culture, the kind of education we received, the kind of relationships we had, the kind of life situations that we went through, all of these forces shape our thinking. And it is all based on duality, the duality of right and wrong, good and evil, moral and immoral, virtue and vice, and so on. A thought by nature is divisive, so it creates this split. And this is what propagates suffering in horizontal time, because I'm always comparing myself with the other. My strive to become better creates the separation which propagates suffering. And, of course, there are concepts in different religions which talk about sin. And now, if one believes themselves to be the individual, if one believes themselves to be the limited mind-body complex, then of course, if body commits a certain act which the mind labels as the sin, then that becomes the sin. If it does a virtuous act, then that becomes the virtue. So you see, this is all labeling done by the mind. And you'll be, as you move to different geographical locations, all these things change. Morality changes, cultural values changes, traditional values changes. What is sin in one culture may be entirely okay in a different culture. So who is to decide what is right and what is wrong? But we human beings are eternally trapped in this thinking that I should not commit a sin. And Maharaj clearly says that there is no you to commit a sin. So why do you worry? It's just that you're holding on to a story, to a baggage of the past. That story is just in your mind, and it keeps on reinforcing this idea that you sinned, that you are impure. But it is just a thought. It is just a story. it keeps you trapped in the duality of pain and pleasure. So some days you are ecstatic, other days you're depressed. Because you're constantly identified with right and wrong, good and bad, virtue and vice. Because you are viewing everything from the person's viewpoint, which is always a limited view. For the being, there is no, for the being, there are no filters. It is direct perception. The what is can only be revealed in the being, in the witnessing, and not in the limited and filtered perception of the person. So, Maharaj says that, I'll just read these lines. He says, why do you insist on polluting the impersonal with your ideas of sin and virtue? It just does not apply. The impersonal cannot be described in terms of good and bad. It is being, wisdom, love. All absolute. Where is the scope for sin there? The virtue is only the opposite of sin. So, when you see things in totality, you don't just see one limited picture of an event, of a happening. You see the totality of functioning, and in that totality, nothing is excluded. Everything is included. The good, the evil, the wonderful, the good deeds, the wars, the pain, the happiness, suffering, everything is included. Nothing is excluded in the totality. And when there is a shift in the perception from the person to the being, then this becomes absolutely clear. Then there is no resistance to what is. It is not a denial of what is happening. It's not what is not that I'm okay. That I necessarily have to be okay with everything. It is simply that I accept. If I'm not okay with what is, even I accept that as well. If I cling on to a particular side, if I take a particular stance on something and I see that I'm attached to it, even I accept that. I do not offer resistance to anything. And if the resistance comes up, then I accept even that. So that is what witnessing is. It is the dawn of spiritual awakening. So, Maharaj says that the questioner asked that, why all the effort at being good? What he's saying is that why do we have this need to be good, need to follow the good and avoid the bad or undesirable? And you see both this need to be good and the aversion towards the bad are a part of the same movement. The reason why the ego wants to associate with good is that is how it gets attention. And the same thing is for the aversion. It wants to avoid bad because, again, that is how it sustains. I want to avoid the uncomfortable, but the I assumes that it is real. Therefore, the suffering continues. Maharaj says, it keeps you on the move. You go on and on till you find God. Then God takes you into Himself and makes you as He is. So once these two concepts of sin and virtue are dropped, then you see yourself as the God, and God is the I am. So, as the wise sages say, where I am, God is not, and where God is, I am not. So, I guess we will conclude here and we'll continue teachings next week. Thank you.